right. Clear right. 2 minutes to go. 2 minutes.
Hey guys, it's Initial B here and welcome to another video, and you're going to want to stick around to the end for this one. There's some great action coming up. So here we are back at the Hungaroring, but this time in a GT3 fixed race. So to start off with, we're going to take you through a quick run through of the Holly lap. It's important to get the exit right out of the final corner, as we've got the longest straight on this track. Very technical track, but it's very doable. So braking at the washed out bit of the track and turning in as early as possible and trying to get the throttle out as early as possible as well. Bringing it all the way back to the right, crossing the bridge and braking just after the 100-meter mark aboard, and then changing it down to second gear and keeping it tight. Here you can really try and get as brave as you can by pushing the throttle on and just keeping it flat through this section here. Very, very fun to deal with. And then here, braking in a straight line. If you don't, it's very easy to wash out onto the right and spin your car as a result. So here, coming in wide and braking in to keep it tight around the corner, and then early throttle on to get the best exit possible. Here we mount the curb a little bit to give us the momentum and get grip on the concrete here to get us through this section. And then here, there's no brake marker, so you kind of have to guess where things are, but there's a lot of trail braking involved here to make sure that you keep the car nice and tight around the corner and just making sure that you keep the front of the car pointing downwards rather than upwards. We don't want to get any understeer around this track at all, given how technical it can be. Now here, braking just after the 100-meter board again, and then keeping it as tight as we can. We don't want to go too far out, as that will give us an off track. Again, keeping it tight around the corner here. I made a little mistake on this entry, but it's fine. We still made the time up. And here, again, keeping it as tight as we can and as brave as we can be on the throttle. It's important to get the exit out, as we mentioned at the start. And there is a lap of the Hungaroring. If you're liking what you've seen so far, guys, please be sure to like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments below. So while we qualified with our best ever lap time, as it was purple times, it was still only good enough for P5, but that's okay. We're still quite far ahead of the pack. It's a GT3 fix, so fixed setup for everyone, but the balance of performance of the BOP tends to be fairly good for this series, but there's always a little bit of a favourite car. So with the Hungaroring, I mean, you can see there's a BMW ahead of us, and that's a front engine car, but everyone's mainly driving mid-engine cars, so we've got two Audis ahead in the front row, we've got a Lamborghini, we have Ferraris in the pack, and we've got a McLaren behind us, so it could be really anyone's game. Here it's just important to make sure that you get a good start, so as we did here, we managed to pull away from the guy behind us. But the problem is, in this position, you really have to be careful because there could be a load of carnage kind of happening behind you, as it happened over there. But luckily enough, it wasn't close enough for us to really get involved. But we still have to keep in mind what's going on ahead of us. So here we can see that the Lambo has gone a little bit wide. I don't think they've made the maximum amount of their grip, and they're losing it a little bit here. And that's them gone effectively. I did get car contact 4X there. It is unfortunate, but he was already spinning around by this point, so there was nothing that I could do to avoid that. Otherwise, I could have unsettled my car and spun out myself. But it's okay. We still got the momentum. We did pick up a little bit of body damage, but it didn't really affect the pace in this race too much. We still managed to average around 43 seconds a lap, which for me, considering I've had very little practice around here in this specific car, in the GT3 class, it really is tricky to drive. Funnily enough, it is a class that has quite a lot of assists, so it's got traction control, ABS, but in order to really maximize this car, you have to drive it as if you never really want the ABS to kick in. So while it's there, drive it like a GTE in a sense. There's not as much downforce as there is in a GTE, but it's still quite fun and really accessible to drive. And as far as it goes, I mean, it can be easy, but it's very hard to maximize the potential of these cars. So today I am in the Lambo Huracan GT3 Evo. So this came out earlier this year, if I remember correctly. But there's a whole mix of cars that you can select here. So really, as I mentioned before, it's anyone's game. But with this car, it's slightly different from the Porsche 911 RSR that I drove in the last video, in the sense that the engine is in the middle, so it's actually quite well balanced, and it still has a short wheelbase. This car and the Audi R8 are very similar in age, so they pretty much have the same engine. I mean, we all know that Audis and Lamborghinis at the high end, pretty much the same thing. I mean, some may argue otherwise, but it is what it is. But I think one of them has a slightly longer wheelbase, so they have an edge in certain tracks over one another, but that doesn't mean they're not equal in performance. And actually, in iRacing, the Lamborghini is a hoot to drive. It is really well balanced, really fun, and you can really push it to get some fast lap times. In comparison, the M4 GT3, and we get a little bit of an off-track there, that is ahead of us, it's got a lot of power, but again, as I mentioned, because the engine's at the front, the rear is just a little bit loose, so when you put the throttle on, it does tend to kick the backside out a little bit. The important thing here is, with the Lambo in comparison, is making sure that the engine doesn't necessarily want to spin around on us, because it's still behind us. Even though it's a mid-engine car, the engine's still behind us, so that's a factor that we have to be mindful of. But with the Hungaroring, as I mentioned, it is a track that's very difficult to overtake on, but it's not impossible, as we saw ahead of us. I mean, we had the Audi R8, I believe, lost the position, but then I think got it back as a result. So really here, it's just a case of trying to make sure that we try and keep ahead of the pack ahead of us, but also making sure that we can try and pull a gap with the guy behind us. Now, I had a really fun battle with Rogelio behind. The difference between the two cars never really got beyond a second, I believe. It was a really close battle. I mean, he tried to put the pressure on numerous times, but it's just making sure that you don't cave under pressure. And here in this section, it's slightly tricky, because if you get the car slightly over to the right and just go over the green section, you will just lose it completely. Or you may end up getting an off track, because it will just push you far out. It doesn't necessarily grip you back into the circuit. But here it's a nice little section down the chicane. And again, you'll see how close he gets, and the flames in that McLaren are absolutely insane. But it's just a constant battle throughout this race. I mean, it's just as important to not make mistakes. It's a very technical track at the end of the day. The GT3s are not as quick as the LMP2s that I've driven here previously, but saying that, you don't really get a break apart from the main straight in this combo. I don't think it matters what car you're driving here. You will basically just constantly be turning the steering wheel unless you're down the back straight. But you see here that he gets quite close to my car. I think he's a lot more confident on the brakes than I am, but because I had track position, it really helped my case here, and he got a little bit squirrely on the exit here, so he lost a little bit of traction. Now, skipping forward a little bit, it really just shows that, you know, several laps down the line, this is now lap 6. It's a 20-minute race, so it basically equates to however many laps you can do within a 20-minute period, roughly. But again, he's just super close to me. He gets to about 0.3 of a second, 0.2 even at one point. But again, I'm just trying to keep it cool. I'm just trying to drive my race. The guys ahead of us are significantly quicker than we are, so we're just trying to run our own race and just trying to not necessarily cave into the pressure. I mean, with these cars, it's so easy to overdo it. I mean, like I mentioned, you have the assist in place, and within the fixed race, we can't really change the level of the traction control or the ABS on that matter. The only thing that we can change, in similar way to the LMP2, is really, as I get another off track there, the brake balance here. As we come around the final couple of corners of this lap, I wanted to take this opportunity to show you how good this V10 sounds in this car. I mean, it sounds great from the interior, but there's nothing quite like listening to it from vehicle mode, so here we go. How good do those pops and bangs sound when you're changing down gears? I mean, nothing quite like it. So I wanted to take you guys through the last couple of laps of this race. As I mentioned, it really was a fight between myself and the car behind for P4, and it's about maintaining that position. At this point, I'm just trying to really predict where he's going to go, in effect. So trying to defend where I can and making sure that I don't necessarily take any risky maneuvers, but then playing it safe, playing the patient game here. Yes, the corners here can be quite long. Some of them are really short, but it's about having the patience to stick it out here. So at this point, I'm just trying to squeeze as much as I can while I have enough room. As you'll probably see in the chase cam on the right, he did tap me a little bit and it unsettled my car coming into this section. And it gives me a little bit of a flash of the lights to let me know that he's there. I did speak to him afterwards and he said it was absolutely fine. But this is the start of it all, effectively. I think he's making desperate attempts to really get ahead of me in the last couple of laps. He's probably thought, I've sat behind this car long enough. I want to try and really get past him and get to P4. But I'm not going to give up that easy. I'm going to make him fight for it. I'm going to make him work for it. I'm just trying to finish as high as I possibly can. As far as the GT3 race goes, this is actually quite good for me because I don't typically race these cars too much. I mean, yes, they're fun to drive, but the level of competition is just another level in this particular series. I mean, here he makes another dive. I'm trying to make sure that he doesn't catch the back of me and absolutely sends me into the realm. But it's just side by side by this point, and I'm loving it. I am absolutely for the action here. There is a little bit of rubbing his racing moment here, and as I dive to the right here to protect the inside line, because this is where you want to be. I mean, if you can get the traction coming out wide, coming into the corner, it's great, but here it's just not braking too late and just trying to keep it as tight as I can. There's nowhere I can go. He's still trying to push me as far as he can, and it's just about maintaining the line here. I mean, here I sort of stuck to my racing line, but he dives and I sort of go slightly to the right to fend off him sending me off. But here, it's just because he was too far on the inside, he didn't have as much of the exit here, and there was nowhere I could go, so he had to be forced slightly off the track here and to get more and more incident points. But here, he just tries to force me wide, and there's not much more that I can do here. I mean, this is hard racing at its finest. I mean, we're trying to keep it as clean as possible, but it's hard racing. No one wants to take each other out. Everyone wants to make sure that they get through as best as they can. And here, as much as he tried to do a two-man round of chicane, it just didn't work. And that really gave me the edge. That gave me the breathing room to basically bring it back home, because then he ended up in a battle with the car behind us. I mean, Oliver was a few seconds behind us at the start of the race, but he really did well to catch up to us. But really, this is what effectively cemented the position. So at the moment, it's just a case of bringing it home. And I take a little bit of an off track here. I think the damage from the contact that I had on the car and the amount that you push the tyres. Yes, it is a sprint race. Yes, it's 20 minutes. But you just go flat out. You don't think about conserving your tyres at all. So at this point, they're starting to fall off a little bit. And here's me basically securing a P4. So it was a good race. I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, very, very happy with the result. Well, I hope you enjoyed that race as much as I did. I certainly felt the pressure towards the end of the race, but I managed to hold out, which is great. These fixed setup races can be super fun, as they can be as simple as jumping in the car and just going for a drive without having to worry about too much about setting the car up in the right way. I also tried to do something different by showing the steering wheel and pedal inputs on camera, so it'll be great to hear from you guys on what you think about that perspective. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments below. So until the next time, take care.